Hi everybody, welcome to our first lesson on the introduction to Torah Sheba'al Peh. The first question we're going to ask is the most basic one. When talking about the Torah Sheba'al Peh, what exactly is it? We talk about the oral Torah, we talk about the Torah Sheba'al Peh. What exactly does that mean? Let's learn. Okay, let's begin our learning. Now the truth is, any learning that goes on in Limudei Kodesh, be it Gemara, be it Halacha, be it Tanakh, be it Jewish philosophy, all of it really begins in one place. One item, with one item we're looking at right here, and that of course is our Torah. What we're going to be doing today is taking a little bit of a look at exactly what does the word Torah mean, what exactly does this Torah represent to us, and how does it affect what we're going to be learning this year. Now if we look at the word Torah, what we'll notice is that it's very similar to other words that we have in our language. For example, the word Morah, or the word, male version, the word Moreh. The word Morah and the word Moreh both mean, teacher. They actually come from the shoresh, the letters Yud, Resh, Hey, which means Yoreh, which means Lahorot, which means to teach. So what we're getting at here is that the entire point of the Torah is to teach us things, so that we can learn from the Word of God. So the question we have to ask ourselves, and I'd like you to think about it for a minute, is, well, what exactly is the Torah teaching us? What exactly, if I was going to tell you that God was going to come down and tell us, teach us certain things, what would those things be? How would you categorize them? If you look at the Torah, you'll notice that there are about, I would say, 3 categories of things that the Torah teaches us, 3 things that we are taught. The first and most obvious one, laws, otherwise known as mitzvot. Specific things that we should do, specific things that we shouldn't be doing. Just like any country might have its set of laws, just like every classroom might have its own set of rules, we have laws as well. Those are known as mitzvot. Secondly, I would say the Torah teaches us about is reality. What is life like? What is the world like? What is God like? How does God relate to human beings? What are people like? How do people react to one another? How do people relate to one another? How do people relate to God? It describes the way life is. And the third thing I would say that the Torah teaches us, morality. How to act, right and wrong, how to behave. This goes beyond laws. Morality is even beyond the laws, even, beyond just, do this, don't do that. But how is a person supposed to be acting? These two, morality and the lessons, morality and reality, so those kind of things are learned more from the stories in the Torah. And the laws, as we said, are direct commandments, direct mitzvot. But the question you have to ask yourself, is there a common theme to these 3 things? Is there a common theme to laws, morality, reality? What is the Torah exactly teaching us when it says, with the word moreh, lahorot? What is the Torah actually teaching us? So as we were discussing, the entire point of the Torah is to teach. The Torah coming from the word lahorot, which means to teach. And we asked ourselves, well, what is it exactly? If I want to summarize it, what is the Torah teaching us? What is it? The laws, the way life works, lessons about morality, right and wrong. I would say that the Torah is teaching us one major thing. It's pretty major, and that is how we're supposed to live our lives. How are we supposed to act? How are we supposed to behave? How are we supposed to think about other people? How are we supposed to think about God? How do we live our lives? That is exactly, I would say, what the Torah is trying to teach us. So what we've seen so far is that the Torah is full of important information. It's all these things about how we're supposed to be living our lives. So if the Torah has so much important information, it's so significant. It's telling us how we're supposed to live our lives. So one would expect there would be a decent amount of details in the Torah. To add to that, if you were to count, I wouldn't suggest this. I much more suggest going on the internet and checking it out. You'd see that there are a total of 304,805 letters in our Sefer Torah, and there are a total of 5,845 psukim. So again, 304,805 words, 5,845 psukim. So one would expect that within all these words and all these psukim you would find details upon details upon details, all telling us how to live our lives. Not just, hey, be a good person, hey, keep Shabbos, but how do I keep Shabbos? How can I act as a good person? One would expect amongst all these words and all these psukim, you would find plenty of details. So what we've seen is that Shabbat, which is such an important part of our religion, so central to Jewish life and Jewish family, has simply 2 commandments in the Torah. Remember Shabbat, and don't do malacha on Shabbat. Now, there are a couple of places where there's something else here and there thrown in, but this is the 2 main things: remember and no work. And the question we have to ask ourselves at this point is, well, where are the details, right? If Shabbat is so important, and we need to know so many things, so what does it mean to remember Shabbat? What does it mean not to do work on Shabbat? Okay? Did you see anywhere where it explained that? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves. If the things in the Torah are so important, if Shabbat, which is so significant, is so important, where are all the details? How do I know how to keep Shabbat? How do I know what I can do and what I can't do? This is something we're going to have to explore a little further. Let's take another example. Look at the psukim in front of you. Can you tell what they're talking about? These psukim are referring to the holiday of Sukkot. More specifically, the mitzvah of Sukkah. On Sukkot, we have the mitzvah of Sukkah. We also have the mitzvah of the Hadassim Ne'aravot, and the Lulav and the Etrog, the Abraminim, that we have to hold when we daven. But these psukim are specifically referring to the mitzvah of Sukkah. So let's see what these psukim tell us about what we have to do. Let's start from the beginning. B'chodesh hashvi'i tachogu oto. You should celebrate it in the 7th month. Okay, so that's something good. It tells us when. Then it continues. What's the mitzvah? Basukot teshavu shiva yamim. You should dwell in Sukkot for 7 days. Okay, so we'll circle Basukot teshavu. We'll also circle shiva yamim, because that also helps us out. Who is supposed to? Kol ha'ezrach b'Yisrael yeshvu b'Sukkot. All Jewish people should dwell in Sukkot. Why? Lama'an yedlu dorotechem, so the future generations know. Ki b'Sukkot shafti b'nei Yisrael, etc., etc., etc. That when we left Egypt and the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt, God protected us by letting us dwell in these huts, and He looked over us, etc., etc. That's the reason. But in terms of the details, right now we have 3. The first is Chodesh Hashvi'i, that Sukkot takes place in the 7th month, in this case the month of Tishrei, which if you count from Nisan, the 7th month is Tishrei. We are told Basukot Teshvu, that we have to dwell, to live in Sukkot. Okay, in these Sukkot, whatever they are. We are told that it's for how long? It's for all 7 days. We have to dwell in these Sukkot 7 days of the holiday. And then we're told the reason, which is not one of the details of the mitzvah. So again, we have 3 things when it comes to Sukkah. So as a good test case, let's look at something in the Torah which is really important. Psukim in front of you. Can you tell what it's talking about? Take a quick look at some of the words. That's correct. It's talking about good old Shabbat, 7th day of the week, the day that we rest. So Shabbat, which is a very important part of our culture and our religion, you would think that in a Torah like this, if it's so important, there'd be a lot of details. So let's see what the Torah commands us. Let's see what the Torah tells us what to do. Let's see what the commandments are. Let's read together. So it starts off, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadsho. Remember Shabbos in order to keep it holy. So what's the one word we have there that commands us? That's right, the word Zachor, which means to remember. We'll say to remember. It's the best definition right now. Okay, so that's our first commandment about Shabbat. Continuing. Sheish yamin tavod, 6 days you should work. V'asita kol melachtecha, do everything that you need. V'yom hashvi Shabbat l'Hashem Elokecha. And the 7th day will be Shabbat for Hashem. Okay, for God. So far, nothing in terms of a command besides Zachor. Let's continue. Then what does it say? Lo, don't, lo taseh, don't do kol malacha, any malacha, any work. Who? Ata uvincha uvitacha, you, your kids, avdecha, your servant, amatcha, your female servant, behemtecha, your animals, ugerecha, the convert who lives with you, asher b'sharach, who's living amongst you. Okay, so in that pasuk we have the phrase lo ta'aseh kol malacha. Okay, we'll just write the word malacha, which means to do work, or we'll say don't work. And let's continue. And then, not even going to continue. Then, ki sheish yamim asa Hashem, etc., etc., because then it says ki, because. It gives us the reason. God created the world in 6 days, rested on the seventh. What we end up seeing from all of this is that the only details the Torah tells us about Shabbat is zachor, remember, and malacha, that you're not supposed to do any malacha, any work. So let's see how helpful these details in the Torah are. We're told that it takes place in the 7th month, which is Tishrei. Now you could ask, well, what day in Tishrei does it take place? Don't worry, elsewhere in the Torah, we're told that it takes place on the 15th of Tishrei. Okay, so that's pretty much wrapped up and explained to us pretty well. Fine. Then, let's look at the third one. We're told that it's for 7 days. Well, you assume that it starts on the 15th and it's 7 days. It's the 7 days of Sukkot, so that's pretty much taken care of as well. We can check off number 1 and number 3 for basically having enough details in the Torah to tell us. But what about the second one? Dwell in Sukkot. What kind of questions could we ask ourselves? Well, what does it mean to dwell? Do we have to live in there? Do we have to go to the bathroom there? And even more important question is, what is a sukkah? Basukot shvu. What in the world is a sukkah? What are sukkot? What are these huts, if that's the literal translation? Are there any details? Can they be any size or any shape? Can you use a teepee as a sukkah? Well, that's a hut. What about one of these old school huts or one of these camping tents? Those all could qualify as sukkah. How am I supposed to know exactly what a sukkah is? Maybe this is good, and this one's good, and this one's good. That's a possibility. But how am I supposed to know? You would expect the Torah to be a little more specific if it wanted to tell us these things. If these things were so important, the Torah is trying to tell us this is how you live, this is how you live as a Jew, you would think that there'd be a little more details. So we have to really ask ourselves the following question. Where are all the details? What happens if I want to know what a sukkah is supposed to look like? Or how to keep Shabbos properly? Where am I supposed to look? Who's going to help me out here? That's the question that we're going to be dealing with. Before answering these questions, let's pause for a minute and take a look at your summary sheet. Fill in the answers that you can fill in now based on what we've done, and after that, come back and we'll answer our question. Okay, welcome back everybody. Just to summarize quickly, as you just did yourselves, the Torah comes from the word lahorot, yoreh, moreh, morah, which means to teach. What does the Torah teach us? We talked about the fact that the Torah teaches us how to live our lives properly. We said that we would expect there to be many details that the Torah is teaching us how to live our lives. We want to know how to do things the proper way and in as many details as possible. Yet many, many details are missing, and we want to know where those details were. So the answer that we discussed is that in fact there are two Torahs. Now, there aren't two Torahs in the way you see them in front of you. It's not as if this scroll represents one type of Torah and this scroll represents another type of Torah. In fact, there are two aspects of the Torah, two parts of the Torah that help do the complete picture. One part of the Torah teaches us the general rules, and the other part of the Torah teaches us all the details. The first and most essential part of our Torah is the written Torah, the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And this Torah Sheba'al Peh was given at Har Sinai, to Moshe Rabbeinu, and this includes just the general rules. Keep Shabbat, keep kosher, don't do malacha on Shabbat, sit in a sukkah. The other component of the Torah is the oral Torah, otherwise known as the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Ba'al Peh literally meaning by heart. This too was given at Har Sinai. When Moshe Rabbeinu was given a specific set of rules to write down, the written Torah which we have in a scroll nowadays, God also said, hey, I just want you to know that when you're going to write down in the scroll you have to keep Shabbat, I'm going to tell you this is what Shabbat means. When it says sit in a sukkah, this is exactly how you sit in a sukkah. This is what a sukkah has to look like. You want to wear tefillin? This is what tefillin have to look like. They have to be black. They have to have straps. They have to have parshiot in them. This was all told to Moshe Rabbeinu orally at the same time that he was told to write down where tefillin, sit in a sukkah, keep Shabbat. The way we know it is because it was passed down from one generation to the next, and we'll discuss that at a future date. And as we pointed out before, it explains and contains all the details to the written Torah. one can in fact say that the Torah Sheba'al Peh fills in the gaps for the written Torah. That's probably the best explanation. That it takes that red, what's around here, this red part would refer to the written Torah, and then there's the Torah Sheba'al Peh to come and fill in the gaps, the details that are missing in the written Torah. So again, one more time to summarize quickly, the Torah Shebechtav has the general rules, and the Torah Sheba'al Peh provides all the details that we need to help understand these general rules. This is the information which is most important in trying to understand. So to answer our question from before, you want to know where all the details of the written Torah are? You want to know how to keep the written Torah properly? Follow the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, the one that has been passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next. In the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, they weren't written down, and we'll talk about how eventually they became to be written down. But they were passed down from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, through the oral Torah, otherwise known again as the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And that concludes our first introductory lesson to help understanding what the Torah Sheba'al Peh is. And now that we understand what the Torah Sheba'al Peh is, we can start looking at the different components and different parts of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, Gemara being one of them. We'll discuss that in future lessons.